Okay, good morning. Okay, today, nice cool day. We're going to be talking about what we consider our most valuable fruit tree. Just because this year we don't can't carry citrus, can't carry mangoes, or our mango supplier burnt down in the fire in Ventura a few years ago. So avocados are our best one left at the moment. So um, first, a couple cultural things. If you buy avocados from other nurseries, they'll warn you don't overwater. Well, the problem we have in the trade is that most of the avocado trees being sold are from a couple growers who don't use the right soil mix to grow them in. Um, Basically, one uses about 75% sawdust, and the other one maybe 40, 50% ground up wood as part of the growing, as part of the soil that they grow them in. And when you have that around the roots of the plant, you keep it moist, the rotting wood particles in the soil tend to cause conditions that make the roots of the avocado rot. And the only way to prevent that is keep them marginally too dry. If you have real good sandy soil around, uh, root rot is caused, actually, the ultimate cause of root rot is low oxygen levels around the roots, and moist conditions promote diseases that rot the roots of the avocado, which can kill it. The thing most that causes those low oxygen conditions ground up dead stuff around the roots. So when they use, quote, compost or wood particles or bark products as a growing medium, then the plants are in trouble. That alone, if it's like 75%, you can say, well, that soil in a year or two is going to become totally uninhabitable because ground up wood does not change into dirt. So the soil avocados would like to live in would be a very sandy soil. Soils in nature are generally mineral, not dead stuff ground up. So when we grow avocados, we try to get them without too much ground up wood around them. Fortunately, our supplier, especially in these small sizes that we're promoting or that we're allowing people to buy, there's no ground up wood in that mix. This is peat moss and sponge rock. Peat moss is still organic. In a couple years, it still can be a problem, but there's so little on here, and peat moss doesn't really promote root rot that easily. The reason being is that peat moss has been sitting at the bottom of the lake for thousands of years, and most of the decomposition in it is pretty much done. It still decomposes, but at a very slow rate. So if you stick this in the water, it doesn't promote the low oxygen levels that ground up wood would. So water isn't the problem. They love water. Avocados love water. They don't happen to have drainage. Drainage helps, but I would imagine most of you have grown an avocado pit in a glass of water and it didn't die. And there's no drainage in a glass of water. But the water in a glass of water is clean, it's well oxygenated, the water circulates freely in that glass, so the roots aren't suffocating. There's plenty of oxygen in that water. The tap water we have, the water districts make sure, they know they have to do this, they have to aerate it 6 to 8 parts per million oxygen atoms per million water molecules to make sure that the plants live in it, that goldfish don't die in it. If it drops too low, probably in a 4 parts per million range, then that's when you start having trouble. Avocados are a little more sensitive. We know pear trees can go down to 2 parts per million of oxygen, but avocados probably can't get anywhere close to that. They've got to probably stay up 5, 6 parts per million to stay healthy. So that's the key, is clean water, nothing dead in the water. Now, avocados in nature have a lot of dead leaves on top of the ground, and that's what they like. They want the dead stuff on top of the ground. While in nature, pretty much anything that's dead is on top of the ground, and the soil below it is pretty much mineral, and that's the way you should set up your yard too. Um, so the plants that we get, so these plants, if you put them in clay, they shouldn't have too much trouble, but clay can still cause problems, if the water sits there too long. So in orchards, the low spots in winter where the water just sits and sits and sits, that can be trouble. So because water doesn't move well through clay soil, if the soil stays saturated for, say, a week at a time, the avocado roots eventually use up all the oxygen in that water. The oxygen levels drop too low and they start getting root rot. So make sure that it's not the lowest part of your garden. Um, in a clay type situation, you can certainly, what the University of California recommends, and this is one they actually do well, they'll tell you if you have clay soil and you want to grow an avocado, dig a hole about a foot deep or so and mix equal parts of sand into it. So you've got this little mound that's half native soil and half sand. And they told me that there's no soil in Orange County that's got too much clay, that if you mixed it 1 part to 1 part 50% sand, it'll breathe. So you can make a little mound and then plant your avocado in it. Root ball there. Tree up here. And the water kind of runs off that area. The worst place to put an avocado is probably the bottom of a big slope, because all winter long that water drains down toward this area, and it can stay really soggy in there, and you can get some root rot problems from stagnating water. Of course, on a slope, if you have a slope, the water tends to stay at the level of that slope coming down. So what you can always do on a slope is build up a little wall and put dirt behind it, and this will then be above that water level coming down the slope. So if you have a little raised area or retaining wall and you put your avocado behind that, that works. So my last house, I had a very clay area backyard, but it sloped away from the edge of my slope, and I planted an avocado maybe 4 feet from the drop off in pure clay. Had no problem at all, even though that was really dense clay. And I know the geologist who did my neighborhood said my whole neighborhood's sand, but my backyard was clay. I asked him, well, what'd you guys do? He says, well, in your area, if the slopes absorb water, they move. So we put 2 foot of clay and packed it down so hard this area would never absorb any water, he told me. So, but we stuck an avocado in it, and it did well. We were amazed. It actually grew 5 feet in 1 year. So well-draining clay is actually a good area to grow it in. So in Orange County, all the foothills around Orange County is part of what is called the avocado belt in California. It's about the best areas to grow avocados for a couple of reasons. It drains well. So even though the clays here are sandy clay, they're considered sandy clay, as long as they're not at the bottom of the hill, they've got good drainage. And the other reason is because the hills don't freeze as badly as the little gullies do. So wherever water collects, the cold air slides down the hills, collects in the low spots in the neighborhoods. Now again, if you're up at 3,000 or 4,000 feet, it does get colder up there. The air temperature drops about half a degree for every 100 feet you travel upwards. But generally in a neighborhood, the low spots collect all the cold air. So wherever there's a riverbed, there's cold. Now we haven't gotten cold enough lately to, at least in most of Orange County, if you're back in the canyons, that's a different story, to freeze the foliage. The year we had a problem was, the only year I can remember having a bad problem on the avocados was 1990. So in 1990, most of Orange County hit 23 degrees in December of that year for about 4 or 5 hours. And we had the tops of avocado trees that were young. The old ones, the trunk, thicker trunk is a lot of wood, that's insulation. But a lot of the trees that were, say, this size um, froze all the way to the dirt. We lost quite a few that year. That was really cold, 23 degrees. That was our record cold for the area. We know that Escondido hit 13 that year. San Francisco hit 13. So they must have lost avocados there. Yes.
How did the big trees handle the cold weather that year?
Apparently they didn't die because there's a lot of big trees that are 50, 60 years old around. So um, I didn't see any damage on the big ones. It was primarily the smaller ones. The thing about cold air too is it hugs the ground. So generally if the tree is 20 foot tall, the top of the tree is not as cold. And the trunk can handle, a big wooden trunk can handle the cold better than something skinny like this. So, so as they get older, they become more immune to the cold. But still, they grow them in the Central Valley. I'm sure this year they've had some troubles. It's been really cold up there. So we don't have to worry as much about the cold on the older trees. These young guys, so once they're in the ground, even in a big pot, the soil is quite insulating. This is not. So if you buy one of these liner trees, we call them, don't leave them outside like this at night unprotected. If they're underneath the eaves of the house, that raises the temperature about 5 degrees. But you can just bring them inside. Wait until this cold spell is over. Now it's supposed to be in the 70s in a week, but usually mid-March is when the temperatures are going to stay well above freezing at that point. So then it's safe to go ahead and plant it. So have good drainage. Sandy soil is better. Don't put any compost in the ground. Compost in the soil will definitely cause root rot conditions. Compost makes the soil richer in nutrients, but it takes all the air out of it, and that's worse. If you just put the compost on top of the mound, on top of the soil, you've got the same nutrients available the way they're supposed to be, and you're not hurting the roots. So now, we never used to think it was worth growing avocados in big containers. But lately we find that you can make them produce a lot better. So I'll go sidetrack here into the pollination thing. So it turns out that avocados are self-fertile. California is still the only place in the world where the academia recommends you plant 2 trees. It's like, okay, come on, California, catch up with the rest of the world. It's just like the Canada announced that Roundup is not carcinogenic. So California is something wrong here. But anyway, the flowers on avocados, there's 2 kinds of flowers. There's an A-type and a B-type. So each flower has a male and a female parts to it, but they don't mature at the same time. So on the A-type flowers, in the morning, the female part of the flower is ready to accept the pollen. And then they said the flowers close midday, and in the afternoon they open up and they're a male. And the female part is already too old at that point to accept pollen. On the B-type avocados, the flower opens first in the afternoon and it's a female, closes up at night, and the next morning it opens and it's a male. So in theory, if you have an A and a B avocado close to each other, you can get a little better cross-pollination from the pollen from that other one between the 2. But generally, what they found is that different branches in avocados have different timing. At noontime, there's a lot of overlap between the flowers, and if you just have one tree, you'll get your avocados. Now, the only research we've seen where they've documented how much it can help. So University of California around 2000, they released their research, maybe a little after 2000, showing, and they've only do it on Hass, because Hass is about the only commercial avocado being grown a lot. Now Reed is too, but Hass is 95% of the market is Hass, or Hass type avocados. So they did the study on Hass. So they found out the best pollinator for Hass is Zutano, but Zutano is totally worthless as a crop. Can't sell a Zutano avocado. They're not bad. I've eaten Zutano, but they have defects. The bottom end is always rotting when the fruit is ripe, and it's not quite as good as a Hass. The book says it's fair plus in quality. To me, it was still, I'd eat them, but commercially, no one's going to buy it. It's a thin green skin on the Zutanos, but it's the best pollinator for the Hass. And what they said is in order to get the pollination, if you have an orchard, the adjacent tree has to be the Zutano. So 1 out of 9 trees has to be that Zutano in order to get the pollination. The bees won't go from here to here. They have to go to the next. They go to the next tree and they'll get that pollen, and then they can cross right over to that tree. So they said you have to replace 1 out of every 9 trees with the Zutano, and you'll increase the production of the Hass around it by 11%. So you take out 12% of your orchard and increase the rest of your orchard by 11%. That's, I don't know what that, the economics aren't there. And then the orchard owners tell me, yeah, you got all these, you got tons of Zutano avocados you got to throw away because they're messing up your orchard. So they said they don't do it. Now, it is true there is another avocado out there that can serve as a pollinator that they can actually sell as a Hass, and that's Surprise. But it is not the best pollinator for Hass. However, it is a B type, and they can sell it as a Hass. So they're putting that one in instead. It may not be increasing the Hass around them much at all, but at least, they got to be in their orchard, a B type avocado, and they can sell it. Now, Surprise, University of California does not want homeowners to have it. So we've carried it in the past, and then they told us, they give us excuses, well, you're not supposed to carry this one and offer it to the public. So we're just saying, okay, we give up. Don't sell, if you don't want to sell Surprise, don't sell it to us. But that's what the orchards, if they're going to put in something to pollinate the tree, they'll put in Surprise. Yes?
We bought a Surprise from you probably 20 years ago. And I don't know whether it is that particular tree or it's that species, but it does not go brown when you cut it.
Mm-hmm.
You can cut it, leave it open on a countertop for 3 or 4 days, and it looks like it just got cut.
Well, they promoted it when we first got them, but yeah, they're not letting us have them anymore. So
What would be the reason for them stopping? What's the rationale?
there's a lot of things they won't let the public have. I don't know. It's your tax money. You can write them and write nasty letters, but there's a lot of things like the gem avocado. They won't want the public to have that. The Deucer rootstock. They don't want the public to have that. Don't know. It doesn't make much sense. But anyway, we'll go through that. So anyway, the pollination on Hass anyway isn't being increased much by having that. And now we know what the best way to make trees improve their pollination is make the bees interested. So they said the kiss of death to an avocado orchard is to be next to a citrus orchard, because the nectar on citrus trees is much sweeter than avocados. So if you have a mixed yard with avocados and citrus, the bees all head to the citrus trees. They don't want the avocados. They're bitter. So that's the main problem with the avocados, is the bees don't like them. So one UC Riverside researcher said, yeah, I think it's a bee problem, because generally with avocados, each avocado tree that's, say, a mature tree 15 foot high or so, there's about 1 million flowers that they make per year. And they get about 100 fruit on those 1 million flowers. That's 1 out of 10,000 flowers makes it to fruit, which is really bad. And the guy says, I think it's just the bees, they don't like them. So he took a little paintbrush and did the pollination himself. And he got 700 fruit. So he says, yeah, the bees don't like them. Well, I'd hate to have someone go and pollinate 1,000,000 flowers. That would take you a lifetime to do that. So a couple years ago, we saw a YouTube video on guys saying, yeah, make the bees do it. Make them like the plants. So what they said is spray honey on the flowers. And we're doing that with this one. You can kind of see it shiny on the leaves here. But you make it 1/4 honey, so that's 1 part honey to 3 parts water to 1 part honey. Use warm water so it mixes better and spritz it on your flowers. They said once a week, and the bees will not leave those flowers alone. You'll have a swarm on each end of the branch. So, yes. Might, but it's too cold right now for the ants to be out. Yes.
We have 2 beehives, and we have orange trees and avocado trees. And we spray our avocado trees with lemongrass oil. They like that. It's not sticky. It doesn't draw ants, and it makes your yard smell like lemons.
Well, the honey does work well too, and it's easier to get that. So, haven't seen any ants on the trees we do it on. But yeah, control your ants. The ants aren't good for the garden at all. They're one of the biggest pest problems we have, and we do have some good ant controls. But so, University of California, they did list the most important factors. Number 1 is temperature. If it's 80 degrees when their trees are blooming, they'll set a lot of fruit. Number 2 is bees, and number 3 is having a and a B type near each other. So they've taken that and put it in 3rd place. We put bees in 1st place. You get the bees on those trees, you get a lot of fruit. So when we saw that video on the honey, we had like 4 avocado trees in our backyard, and by June that year, only 1 had set. We're going, okay, this is terrible, because we have citrus and apples and everything else in that yard. So the bees just weren't on the avocado tree. Well, on the last 10 flowers, we sprayed the honey water, and the next day we go out there, and there's 5 bees on that 1 branch. And out of those last 10 flowers, we got 5 fruit. So 1 out of 2 is really impressive. So the tree, when you spray honey on them, you get more fruit on there than the tree can develop, which is fine. A lot of it will drop off, but you'll get loaded up. So we used to think that they were real light producers, no use putting them in a pot. And then a friend of mine had his in a 24-inch box, which is about the size of a half barrel, and he had 80 fruit on his tree. We're going, okay, that's a lot of fruit in a barrel. That's pretty good. So we don't discourage people from planting them in pots anymore.
So when you're spraying the honey water, you spray the leaf or
The flower,
the flowers?
yeah, the end of the flowers. Yes.
If you have a huge tree, could you just put it in like one of those sprayers that have the water and the
Hudson sprayer.
dilute it?
Hudson sprayer.
You mean a hose end sprayer, or?
Like a Hudson sprayer.
You know, Hudson sprayer would work. Hose end sprayer, I don't know that the honey would come through. It'd be too thick. Because those hose end sprayers are proportioners, and usually they do a 10-to-1 ratio, and it's, if you put the honey in there, 10-to-1 is probably too weak, and the honey would be too thick to suck up at full strength. So, yeah. I mean, you know, if you just do the bottom of the tree, you'll have plenty of fruit. I mean, we were looking at one tree once. At the Great Park, we were looking at a tree over there on the bottom branch. They had beehives right next to it. Bottom branch, 1 branch had 50 avocados on it. So that's a lot of fruit on 1 tree, 50 avocados on 1 branch. But anyway, the bees are the thing, and spraying honey on them seems to be the trick. Now, some years the weather just won't cooperate. So there's some avocados that seem to bloom in December, January, February, the early bloomers. And boy, back in the 1980s when I was growing them, It was like 25 degrees at night and 50 in the day, and I didn't see any bees at all with weather like that. Now, actually, probably if I'd sprayed honey on, the bees would have showed up, but we couldn't get any pollination going because it was so cold. The bees just didn't find the trees either.
Is there a specific type of honey that you recommend, or any type?
Not, I don't know that the bees have a preference. If it's honey, I don't know. That I haven't tried. So anyway, so you only need one tree, and if you spray the honey on the flowers, you'll get plenty of fruit. Now, just note that if there's the fruit on this branch will not grow for a year. So if the tree is this small, I would say, yeah, let the side branches fruit. Don't let the top of this tree fruit. If you have fruit forming up there, clip it off and get it to grow some more. So you want, when the trees are this young, I mean, you want that tree to get at least, say, 5 by 5 foot, or 5 by 6 foot, or 6 by 6 foot before you really get into heavy production. You want that foliage cover, because avocados sunburn easily if they don't have good leaves on them. So what the growers do, so these trees are grafted where the rubber band is. So anything below this rubber band on this tree is a Zutano avocado rootstock. So this was grown from this one doesn't show it, but this one shows how they grew these. So they put a Zutano seed, which is a really big pit, and then they said it makes pretty darn good roots. Start that growing, let it grow. They probably planted this last spring, let it grow through the summer, and late summer, early fall, they cut off the top and stuck off this short branch this is a Carmen avocado in here, and then the top of that branch sprouted out and started growing. Now avocados can regrow from this area, but if it burns down to here, you got problems. So what they do is they cover this area with a piece of cardboard to make sure they don't lose the graft area. Now you can cover with cardboard, you can paint it white. There's several things you can do to prevent sunburning. Now you'd think that they wouldn't be that sensitive because they're from Guatemala and Mexico, southern Mexico and Guatemala. Why would they be so sensitive to the sun? Well, if you grow an avocado from a pit, you'll notice that the leaves on it are so symmetrical the sun cannot reach the stems. But when they're grafted like this, they're all wacky. They don't cover themselves well. They're growing off to the one side, so there's a lot of exposure to sunlight here. And generally, the leaves don't sunburn. It's the stems that sunburn. They're not used to being in the sunlight. So we do sell a whitewash. So when the trees are young, it's nice to protect them. Now this is a really good whitewash. I would say a little pricey, but this is enough to cover about 5 fairly good-sized trees. So this will go quite a ways. This is more or less the type of material that a professional orchard would use. Instead of making it out of paint, they make it out of iron oxides, limestone, milk, mica, and silica. So we know that the orchards have said they use dried milk and what's that stuff called? Silicon. What is that? The drying agent called? Silica gel. That combination to whitewash orchards. But what this company also does is they put essential plant oils in here which help repel bugs and rodents. So in here also is castor oil, cinnamon oil, clove oil, garlic oil, peppermint oil, rosemary oil, and spearmint oil. Now it is pricey, $35, but it will, again, I covered about 5 trees with it. As far as sunburn protection, 1 treatment a year is usually good enough. For the rodents, no, you'd have to apply this quite often. The oils don't last that long, but it doesn't hurt it to apply it a lot. So again, you don't have to paint the leaves in general, just paint the stems any stem that's exposed to the sun. And you can do other things for sun protection, put foil on it, cardboard on it, wrap it in, some kind of cloth,
So how much of that would you paint on that?
whatever the sun can touch. Now, the danger point is about 105 degrees. We thought, the trees we're getting from this is Brokaw Nursery. Brokaw is perhaps the largest supplier of avocado trees in California and perhaps the world. They have, so Brokaw Nursery, they have partners in Australia, South Africa, Spain, and I think one of the Northern Africa countries too. But they go around the world and they help the guys grow the avocados properly, so they do a good job. They're up in Ventura here. They used to be, I believe, in Yorba Linda next to the Hass Ranch. So they made their fortune growing avocado trees for the Hass family ranch in Yorba Linda, and then they moved to Ventura.
What happens to the ranch when it's sunburned?
Okay, good. So when the branch sunburns, it may not kill it. So on this plant, this is actually one of our runs from last year. So this looked like this a year ago. And then the July 6th, 115 degrees hit, and this branch wasn't straight up, and it just burned the heck out of that stem right there. And when you burn a branch of this size, it really messes up the circulation in there. So generally what's going to happen is this tree is going to use one of the branches below the burnt area as its main trunk. This one's been burnt too. So this tree may just send out a new branch right about here that takes off and becomes the main tree, because this one's so burnt it probably can't do it anymore. It won't, the circulation is compromised.
After it's burnt like that, are you better off leaving it or better off cutting it off and letting another branch become the leader?
Well, when you cut it off, when it's burnt like this, it also prevents a lot of the energy from this branch from going down to the roots, so it's going to flower and fruit better. So I just leave it. It's still functional, but there's a bud coming out here. I'm thinking this one's going to send out a new trunk that becomes a new tree. When they're this young, they're like rubber. If this stake wasn't here, this branch is lay down. And for sometimes the plants will grow all these branches out in all directions, and then finally one decides it becomes the main trunk. Of course, in most avocado orchards, they do not want a straight trunk anymore. You see pictures of orchards, and they're branching them off at 6 inches because they want their trees to be as low as they can, so you don't have to climb up ladders to pick them. So the Brokaw Nursery, when they send their trees out to orchards, they don't usually sell these to orchards. They grow them for another year until they're about this size, and then they sell them. But the stake height that's on the plant is only 2 feet. They make sure they have 2 foot of trunk that's fairly straight, and then the rest is up to the farmer. He wants to have a taller trunk, he can do that, but most farmers just let them bush out. And there's a lot of ways you can grow the trees, but generally in California they make them big bushes. But I was looking at a video on how they grow them in Japan, because in Japan, avocados in Japan probably cost $20 a piece, but they have to grow them in greenhouses because it's too cold in the winter there anywhere in Japan, except for maybe in Okinawa, to grow an avocado tree. So they grow them in greenhouses, and what they do is they plant them in big pots, and they just grow them in 2 directions. And they want the branches to be slightly elevated, but not quite horizontal. If they're horizontal, they don't grow. You have to be slightly elevated, especially at the tip, to get that thing to continue growing out. But they want them to be fairly horizontal, makes them fruit better. But the greenhouse is like this. It's not very high greenhouse, so you see a picture of their greenhouse, and the trees are just lined up one after another, all these low V's. And that's how they do it there. just a row of V-shaped plants. But generally here, we keep them more bush-shaped. A dome, supposedly a dome shape is more the most efficient form. And supposedly the smaller the dome, down to about 5 feet, the more food production you'll get per square foot. So the orchards now, I've been told by the orchard people, they keep them around 12-foot max. You know, they used to let them grow 20-foot high and 20-foot wide. They don't do that anymore because most of that tree is non-productive. It's just shade. So now they're keeping them a lot smaller, 10-foot, 12-foot max. They trim them every winter to keep them that size. Most of the fruit production is closer to the bottom. If you cut the top of your tree, you're not losing that much fruit.
So when your tree gets taller, you just kind of cut the top?
Yeah, prune them in winter is the safest. Then you won't, you know, whenever you prune an avocado tree, you know, they say you can prune them any time of the year. But if you prune them when the weather's warm, you got to watch out for sunburning. So if you prune them in the summer, you got to make sure you whitewash the area so it doesn't burn. In the winter, there's no problem. Now, at the beginning of the drought, a lot of the orchards, especially in the San Diego area, they had much more problem with the drought than we did. They opted to just cut their trees down so they wouldn't have to water them for half a year. So we decided, oh, let's try that. I want to see what that does. So I had a tree that was close to 20 foot, trunk about this big. It was about 10 or 12 years old. Took the chainsaw and just cut it down. They said 4 feet, so I cut it down to 4 feet, and it just stayed a stump for about 4 months, and then it sprouted out, and by the end of the year it was back up to 10 foot. And it flowered the next year and had a crop. So okay. So I didn't have to water it for half the year because there's nothing there to water. So they saved water that way. So in the old days, the way they pruned them was let them grow to 20, 25 foot, too high to pick, saw them down, and then they lose 1 year production and then get going again. And then every 5 or 10 years, they'd saw them down again when they got too tall. So now what the University of California has designated or developed trees they call dwarf. Well, they had a suspicion about the dwarf trees, why they were staying small, and they found out primarily it was production. So the avocados that produce the most fruit stayed the smallest, because just for that reason. If they're fruiting on a branch, that branch doesn't grow for that year. The trees that produce the least amount of fruit were the ones that grew the biggest. So Fuerte, which is the lousiest producer of the commercial varieties that used to be grown, was considered a big tree because it rarely produced fruit. And then the Hass, they said 1 out of 3 years is good, so 2 out of 3 years it grew 3 feet a year, and 1 year it would just stay the same size. The Gwen and the Gem, which are considered dwarf trees, stay around 8 to 12 foot because they produce good crops every year. But that's the tree they had suspicions about, so they took them, they said they cut off all the flowers for 5 years and the trees broke 20 feet. So it was the production that was keeping them small. If you spray honey on these trees, they're not going to grow. They'll be so productive that they'll stay small. So the first few years of a tree's life, just feed it a lot of nitrogen, high nitrogen fertilizers, the ones for fruit trees. Now, when we start our avocado trees, we always use Osmocote, which is fairly high nitrogen. It's 15, 9, 12 between the ratios between nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You want a lot of potassium in there too. That makes the fruit larger. And the growers tell me also want a lot of calcium. So they do recommend gypsum. Now, I'll have to get on Brokaw's website again because I kind of remember reading on their website they apply 40 pounds of gypsum per tree every year.
What?
Which to me is an incredible amount of gypsum. Gypsum's kind of a neutral, it doesn't cause any burning or anything because there are soils that are super high in gypsum. But that just seems outlandish, but I'll have to read that again and see. but they do recommend, they said calcium, the gypsum does help prevent root rot. And it is one of the major nutrients of a plant. So the most important nutrients, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, but after that it's calcium, magnesium, are also two very important minerals for plants in general. So, and they said calcium's overlooked too much. So calcium's important too. You can go organic. In the nursery, you don't use as much organic matter because most of the organic products are very lightweight, and when we're watering our pots, they kind of get washed out of the pot. And they usually take a few weeks longer to get going. In the grounding yard, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just put a lot of organic fertilizer on the ground, and that works too. But here in the nursery in pots, and we like this chemical fertilizer too. It's just easier for us because this is supposed to last 6 months, whereas most fertilizers you have to put them on every month. This one we can just put it on, forget about it. We just say, okay, this tree will sell before we have to fertilize again. Now on an avocado, just so you know, if it needs fertilizer, the veins will turn light. So you can see this one here, especially the older leaves, the center vein, well, that one just fell off, is turning yellow. And that means the tree is needing more. What the tree is doing is it's pulling the nitrogen out of the old leaves to put in all this new growth that's about to put on. So if you give it plenty of nitrogen, you won't see this. Now, a lot of avocado trees, there's most avocado trees, what they happen to do though is every time they put on a new set of leaves, they drop the old set, just the way it works on avocados. So, and don't take their leaves and throw them in the trash. They want their leaves underneath them. They recycle all the nutrients in these leaves. So, don't let your gardener take it away. And as far as older trees goes, they do not recommend fertilizing when they're blooming. They said that if you fertilize the tree, because fertilizer isn't an energy source, it's a building material. So if you fertilize the tree right before it blooms, you're telling the tree, make leaves. Don't make fruit, make leaves. So they say starve the trees when they're blooming. When they're done blooming, then feed them towards summer and get their leaves going.
And they have fruit on them then.
Right. When the fruit's forming, then it's time. When they're young, feed them. Just keep feeding. You got to get the foliage. It's more important to get the foliage going than it is anything else. Now, if you really want to grow a tree, make it productive and make it grow, there are ways you can cheat. We do this a lot in the nursery. So rather than just feeding them a fertilizer, which again isn't energy source, if you wanted to really make them grow fast, you can spray them with sugar. So, the leaves are solar panels of the tree, and their job is to take carbon dioxide and air and water from the ground and change them to sugar, which is carbon 6 H12O6. That's just carbon dioxide and water combined that makes sugar with sunlight of the energy from the sun. They do that, and that powers up the tree. The trunk of a tree is cellulose, which is a sugar molecule. So most of this plant is made out of sugar. There is nitrogen in the membranes of the cells. The potassium is the sap, but most of this plant is sugar. And if you spray sugar on them, the leaves do absorb it. We found out in the 1980s the leaves absorb sugar. So if you really want this plant to flower, fruit, and grow at the same time, you can spray with sugar as often as you like. The original formula was molasses. They also recommend you put seaweed in it and a water-soluble fertilizer. Now, I'm a little shy on fish. The original formula was for fish emulsion, but we'll tell you that any good water-soluble fertilizer can substitute for the fish. But but the original formula was 1 ounce, 1 ounce, 1 ounce of these 3 items in a gallon of water and sprayed the leaves as often as you like, and the tree will then get energy and grow and fruit all at the same time.
And you can do it any time in the cycle.
Yeah. Anytime you want, you can spray this on the tree. Now, in spring and summer, you spray on the tree, it makes the tree grow like a weed. In the fall and winter, if you spray it on, it makes it store a lot of energy for the next crop. So most trees store energy in the fall. So any sugar you spray on in the fall is put to the flowers for the spring. Any sugar you spray on in the spring and summer is put into growth. So, but if there's fruit hanging on, I'm sure it goes to the fruit too. I was told by,
How often?
well, the book had it every 2 weeks. That's the original article in California Rare Fruit Growers magazine back in the 1980s said every 2 weeks. But there's no reason you couldn't do it every day if you wanted to.
And if you did that during the summer, could it burn the plant?
That's sugar, seaweed, kelp. I mean, that's, if you want to grow a 1,000-pound pumpkin, that is their secret. So they said without this stuff, they can't get anything above 500 pounds on those monster pumpkins. So that's one of the things that they do too. It, you know, it's kind of cheating, but
So what would the difference be if you were to use the honey, spraying with the honey,
I don't know if plants can absorb honey.
with the water?
Yeah, I don't know. We know they can absorb sugar. I don't know if, you know, honey, I don't know if that, how complicated that molecule in there is. Is it fructose? I don't know I haven't read anything about that. The original formula was molasses. We've substituted Karo syrup and table sugar for molasses and seemed to get decent results. But molasses was the original formula. Now, lately we haven't used the fish because every time you use fish here, all the windows slam shut on the apartments next door. So now we use the palm food, which is a really well-rounded chemical fertilizer. It's got most of the minerals that the organics do in it, and it doesn't smell as bad. Seaweed doesn't smell too bad. It smells like you're at the ocean.
What was that, tablespoon each?
Ounce each per gallon of water. In a quart, you can say about a tablespoon of each, and a quart is fine. Or if you want to be accurate, it'd be 2 teaspoons in a quart. But
I don't know if you talked about why this one has the brown on the ends of the leaves. What that means?
that was last summer's 115-degree temperature that did that, and it hasn't dropped them.
Okay.
Otherwise, you know, like on this tree, the very top of the tree just shriveled up and turned black. This is the top of this tree. That's what happened with that heat wave. I mean, my daughter was watering the trees at her growing ground. She was calling us up saying, I'm watering them all day and they're still doing this. I mean, it was just so hot, you couldn't stop it. It just burned all the tips off. And because of that heat wave last summer, the California Avocado Commission says that this year's crop is going to be less than 50%. All the fruit just burned off the trees, or you know, more than 50% burned off the trees. So there's not much you can do about that. Okay, some of the pests that they can get. There's one bug that can cause a bit of trouble. Well, there's several bugs that can cause trouble, but one that can cause a lot of trouble is called the Persea mite. But there is a natural predator that's going around controlling it, so you may not have to do too much on it. But what it does is on the leaves of the tree, you'll notice that there's these silvery patches that form near the veins. And if they get enough of these silvery patches, the leaves fall off. Well, if you look at the silvery patches with a jeweler's loupe or a 10-power magnifying glass or a microscope, notice that each silvery patch is a spider web. Underneath each spider web is a colony of little spider mites. And they suck on the leaves. When they suck on a leaf, they're actually a true spider. So what spiders eat insects, they inject toxins to that insect which dissolves the bodily fluids, and then they suck it back out. Well, they do the same thing to the leaf of the avocado. They inject a toxin in each cell of the leaf, and it liquefies the cell, and then they suck it out. Well, that little toxin they inject in there, if there's enough of it, the leaf starts to turn brown around the edges and they fall off, and your tree goes bare. It doesn't kill the tree. When all the leaves fall off, the spider mites are gone, and the leaf tree goes back, but you lose a lot of energy that way. So they brought in another little mite that eats this mite. So it used to be a lot worse. Now what we see is, and this mite not only goes after avocados, but some of its relatives. The camphor trees, which is a common street tree around here, gets it too. So in my neighborhood, every 5 years or so, we'll see a bunch of the camphor trees dropping leaves, and then they grow back, and it's fine again. Generally what happens is the Persea mites go through the neighborhood with their predator mites not far behind. So they kind of control it. But if you see that on your tree and you want to stop it immediately, you just spray it with an oil spray. Neem oil or some kind of horticultural, just spray it good and you've got it. When we saw this first in the 1990s, one treatment of oil cleaned them up perfectly. We didn't get any rebound effect. Yes?
So by the time the leaf drops, the mites are out, so it's safe to leave the leaf on the ground as a...
Generally, when mites hit the ground, there's so many other predators down there, they don't have a chance of getting back up. They say if you ever look at the soil closely, there's maybe 100 mites per square foot that are predators. So the mite on the ground has very little chance of getting back up. They hitchhike in the air and make it to your tree from the air, but if they're on the ground, they're dead.
So you can leave a bad leaf as an insulation on the
Yeah,
ground
I would.
without affecting the tree.
Right. Yes.
I've had mites for probably 5 or 6 years on my avocado tree. I called an arborist. I live in Rancho Cucamonga. He told me that the wintertime, like right now, is they're least active.
True.
He looked at them with a magnifying glass. He said, they're not active right now. They were here,
Mm-hmm.
but they're gone now. But he said they'll be back. And sure enough, in the spring and summer, that's when they're more, you'll see them.
Yeah, definitely warm weather brings them around because they're from Mexico and Guatemala. So, and the rules on oil is don't spray if it's too cold. So oil kills by suffocation. So it covers the mite can't breathe for half an hour and it's dead. The tree can hold its breath for several hours. The oil's got to evaporate. So the way it evaporates is the weather is above 50 degrees, it can evaporate. But if it's too cold, don't do it that day. Wait for a warmer day. Rain will lock the oil right on the leaf, and then you've lost the leaf. The leaf will just suffocate and fall off. But cold will do it too. So do it on a warm, dry day if you're going to spray the oil on the tree. So oil can be sprayed up to about 90 degrees without damaging the leaves also. Occasionally we get a few things eating the leaves like snails. For snails, there's a copper tape you can just wrap around the trunk or just put a lot of snail bait around. Grasshoppers can do this too. Grasshoppers there's no control for, but for the green grasshoppers, which are katydids, the organic products like spinosad, Captain Jack's Deadbug Brew will stop the green grasshoppers and occasionally get caterpillars. I don't know, I've never seen caterpillars eating avocados, but they're out there. So Captain Jack's will do that too. If you do get root rot, so back in around 1995, the University of California sent letters to all the nurseries saying that this is an amazing product for avocado trees. It's called Garden Phos. Now, in those days, it was called Agriphos, but it's mono and dipotassium salts of phosphorus acid, which are two of the minerals that plants need to grow. Those are two important minerals, but it's a certain form that it really raises the phosphorus content of the plant very quickly. And phosphorus is one of the minerals they need for good disease control. And they said in South Africa developed this product, and they said when they injected trees with this that were 90% dead from root rot, they came back to life. So in many states of the United States, this is registered as a fertilizer, not as a fungicide. In California, they do register it as a fungicide, but there's no waiting time. You can spray this, you can apply it as a spray, as in, we don't have the tools to inject it, or as a root drench, soil drench, and you can eat the fruit. It's not considered a poison at all. But they said it's really amazing that way. So a lot of orchards, they don't buy this, they buy a cheaper version of this, and they said they put it in their irrigation water every now and then just to prevent root rot. It's become a very valuable product for other reasons in the nursery industry too. It stops downy mildew on impatiens, downy mildew on basil, downy mildew on roses. Now, you've probably never seen downy mildew on roses, but if your roses ever turn yellow and the leaves fall off, that's downy mildew. It happens in cool, wet weather. So we spray this on our roses now and then in the winter time to stop that, on impatiens in the summer, and basil in the summer to stop the mildew from getting those. So, and it's supposed to stop sudden oak death, which is ravaging parts of the Central Coast. So anyway, that's a valuable product too. Okay, I think we covered most of the care. So the varieties. Oh, so we're selling these small guys, but a lot of our customers, and you can buy this from us too, so you can just put them in a 5-gallon bucket. And at this point, they'll probably grow faster in here than they will in the ground, because in the sunlight, this warms up a little better. But be careful at night. So in the nighttime, you can bring it close to your house for warmth, or even bring it inside, and it'll grow faster than it would be if it's in the ground. It does take it 3 or 4 months to have the roots knit the soil together so you can pull it out. You can cut the pot away without too much damage on the roots, but if you wait till summer, it takes about 3 or 4 months for these roots to get a good hold, and summer's fine. Plant them in the summertime. They love heat. Just anything below 110. Oh, I mean, yeah, I was going to make a comment. We've never saw brokaw tree sunburn until 2010 when it hit 112 that year. We had not seen, you buy an avocado from any other grower, they burn at 90 because they're so unhealthy. They don't have good circulation in them. But our brokaw trees at 100 degrees, we never saw them burn. So we thought their trees just don't burn until 112 degrees in 2010. We saw the sun burning on all the trees, said, okay, we got to whitewash them. And then last year, when it hit 115, that's when the leaves actually burnt. First time we saw the leaves burn.
Gary?
Yes.
Can you keep that in that pot for like a year before you put it in the ground?
Well, it'd be like this. Yeah. Yeah, that's what the brokaw does. They keep their plants in the pot for another year. Now, brokaw does something different than they don't sell these to the orchards. They actually sell most orchards buy avocados on a clonal rootstock. So this is on a seedling rootstock. Zutano is considered fairly good hardy roots. However, they're like your kids. Each seed is like your children. They're not the same as you. They might resemble you, but they're not genetically the same. And now and then you'll get a bad one. So, or a really incredible one. So what they do is they clone roots for the orchard so the orchard knows exactly how strong the root's going to be. And the way they found these is they had orchards that were all seed, before 1980, all the roots were seed grown. And generally, if you buy a retail product, the roots are going to be seed grown. But what they found in orchards that were dying from root rot, there'd always be, say, 1 or 2 trees that survived. So they figured those trees had the stronger roots. So they would encourage those roots to sucker, and then they would take those branches and make new trees out of them, and then they would use that tree as the strong tree. So there are names out there. Toro Canyon was found down south in Toro Canyon. They're named after the areas where the orchards were. Borchard. There's quite a few, I can't remember all the names that we see, and those were survivor trees that had been more immune to root rot diseases than the general seedlings were. And the way they have to make them is they grow, now it's always good to start with the pit, so they plant a Zutano pit, let it grow, a branch off this rootstock tree, let's say Toro Canyon, they take a branch off the Toro Canyon avocado tree and graft it onto here and grow that for 6 months or so. And then what they do is they put this in a pot about this size with this at the bottom. They put a metal ring on this which will eventually girdle this Zutano and kill it. And they put it in a dark room, which makes it more likely for the top to root out. So they bury this thing, it's actually a little deeper in there, and the dirt's all around the stem of this, and the roots come out of the stem of the Toro Canyon tree. And then after that, they bring it back out, and then they graft the top to whatever tree they want. In this case, it's a Carmen avocado they graft on top of that. So they have to graft it twice. The trees cost about twice as much, but they say 90% of the orchards opt to get the clonal rootstock, so they know what they're getting. For a homeowner, if you lose an avocado tree because it was unusually weak, you're not going to lose your business. But the orchards want to make sure they have to invest twice as much to get it. So we do sell, like that tree is on the clonal rootstock, and I am getting a few. Next month we're due to get in some on Toro Canyon and some on Borchard. They won't let us have the Dusa, which is the one most orchards want. What Dusa rootstock, it's very resistant to root rot, but it's also makes a tree very precocious. Makes it flower and fruit right away. Whereas the Toro Canyon is a very vigorous rootstock, and that's, in my case, at my house, one of my avocado trees grew 5 feet the first year, and the other one grew 10 feet the first year, no fruit for 3 years. Whereas on the Deuce rootstock, they fruited immediately. But the plants didn't look that good on the Dusa. You have to have better conditions for that rootstock. Apparently, Toro Canyon, the trees were gorgeous, but grew like a weed, which you may not want, but that's all that, they'll let you have that one. I heard the Borchard rootstock is pretty good root rot resistance, but it's very salt sensitive. You get a lot of tip burning on the leaves. Yes.
Under good conditions, how long until those trees, the ones in the orange leaves, produce fruit?
This is a year later.
Oh, okay.
So they can flower. I mean, it's interesting. About 10 of the trees we got this size were already blooming. So I wanted to produce right now. I mean, that would totally stun it. But a year later, they're blooming. So
The ones that you have for sale that are small like that, it's kind of hit or miss. They're not clonal.
true, the rootstocks on these aren't cloned. But neither are the roots on, 100% of the trees on retail market are not cloned.
Right.
So.
But I bought those and they didn't do very well.
Well, it's not because of the rootstock, it's because they're grown in the wrong dirt. So. Okay.
Those orange, I bought 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
At Brokaw, where do you think they're growing them? Are they growing them indoors in a controlled climate?
Oh yeah, they have greenhouses there.
So if I take them home and it's 35 degrees like it was this morning, I want to keep them warmer.
You bring them in at night. I mean, we got these a week and a half ago, 2 Mondays ago, and in our parking lot they were burning. They were out in the parking lot for just about an hour, and they were burning. So we got them in the shade right away, but we put them out in the sun every day, and they no longer burn. So they're now adapted to full sun, but cold, I don't know if you can adapt to that in this small a pot. So it'll take them a while to adapt to that. Now, the dry air was causing trouble with them too. The leaves are rolling and actually drying up on the tips. They stopped doing that now too. So we've got them acclimated to the outside pretty well. Just the cold you have to worry about from this point on.
How quickly can you put that into a bigger container?
We've been potting them up as fast as we can.
And you wouldn't advise us to let that fruit?
This one?
Mhm.
If you spray it with sugar, or you can get both.
But do you want the growth instead?
It's your choice.
Is that the soil you use on the 5 gallon, the bag you have that's?
Yes. Yeah. So that. Yeah. Thank you. So we grow them in our top potting. So oops, didn't do that too well. And this has no compost in it. Nothing that's considered compost. It does have peat moss to hold moisture, but most of it is either sand, volcanic rock, sponge rock. There is a little charcoal in here too to hold the nutrients. But you can water. So we can water our plants as often as we like. Once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. It's not going to rot them. There's nothing in there that causes root rot.
When you say bring them in at night, like if you have a covered patio, like totally covered, not a lattice, is that in or does it need to be?
Well, that would be fine with the weather we've been having, but if it drops down in the 20s, I'd bring it inside.
Which isn't likely.
Not likely, but you don't know.
And then but if you did that, then during the day, you'd start acclimating them to being in full sun.
Right. I mean, the other thing you can do if they're outside, you can throw a box on top. The ground's warm. If you throw a trash can over them, that'll keep them warm for the night. Or you can put a tomato cage over it and throw a plastic bag on top. That'll keep them warm at night. You can put a halogen light on them. That'll keep them really warm.
And they
So.
would be safer in a bigger pot anyway, right?
Right. The bigger pots are better insulated. Our soil is very insulating with all that sponge rock and volcanic rock in there. Sponge rock is what they use in the space shuttle to insulate the capsule. So that's what they use in spaceships. So it's very.
Are you gonna cover anything about squirrels and
Oh, please.
rats?
Squirrels are hard to deal with. Squirrel poison is the best way to deal with those. Rats are actually not too bad. Now, a good outdoor cat is certainly good to have. But rats, what we found to be the best is bubble gum. Although it won't kill every single one of them, you'll get rid of most of them that way.
Can you explain?
Well, we thought it was a stupid idea for 10 years until we finally tried it. So daughter got some double bubble gum, we unwrapped them, put them on our block wall because we have a dog that eats bubble gum, so we put it on the wall so the dog couldn't reach it. And in 2 days, I had 2 dead rats and a dead mouse on the ground. I'm going, that works faster than the rat poison. I was surprised that it actually works, but what they say happens is they eat it. One rat eating 1 piece of bubble gum is like you eating this much. It doesn't digest. Kills them. They were just starved to death and fell on the ground. I couldn't believe it worked that quickly.
You got one of those little packets or how much bubble gum?
Well,
Bubble gum do you leave out?
as much as you want. I think my daughter left out about 10 pieces.
Oh, then you just leave it and put it on the ground.
So we have owls nesting. That wouldn't kill the owls if they ate the.
I don't think so. I don't think most predators don't eat stomach contents. They're pretty selective on how they eat their prey. So it'd be a lot safer than poisoning them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's supposed to do rats, mice, and gophers. I'm hoping it does squirrels, but I don't know. I haven't been able to kill the squirrels I haven't seen any dead squirrels yet with the bubble gum. So squirrels are hard. In that case, you probably just have to bag the fruit. Put Ziploc bags around each fruit. See if they can figure that one out. Or, in Japan they use silk bags. University of California said paper bags, get small paper bags. But they said
really bad lately, the last couple of years.
yeah, squirrels are,
Squirrels go after the avocados.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And raccoons do too. They're nothing, all you can do with raccoons is trap them. I was, about 10 years ago, at night, we heard this noise in our backyard, and we looked out the window, and the avocado tree is going like this. And there's my 20-foot avocado tree, and there's a raccoon on the wall just taking it and swinging it back and forth as hard as it could to knock the avocados off it. Anyway, okay. So 90% of what's sold or grown commercially is the Hass avocado, which is that one and that one. And it's still a good one to have. If you get the bees on there, you'll get a good crop. They ripen, I believe it says February. Need one of those sheets. Oh, thank you. February to August. And this is for Irvine, because if you live in, if the avocados are grown inland further, it's early in the year. If they're going down south, it's earlier. If they're grown near San Francisco, it's actually later than this by a few months. And so every year it's going to be a little different too. Sometimes they'll ripen earlier, sometimes later. Generally, they're on the tree for at least 1 year. So don't pick your fruit too soon. And in general, the way you tell is when the fruit's hanging there, if you turn it 90 degrees to the side and it pops off the branch, it's ready. Or if the stem that's attached to the fruit starts turning yellow right where it attaches, that means it's about to fall off. So the fruit can be picked as early as February, but the same fruit can hang on all the way close to August. Now, the only other tree that's really grown much commercially is reed, and we do like reed. Now, the way Brokaw designates the fruit is they put these little swizzle sticks in here, and the different colors are the different varieties. So, reed is green, little green stick. We put R on it. No, this one didn't get an R, or it rubbed off. But the green ones are the reeds. So reeds are these big cannonball avocados, almost round. They're better than Hass as far as we're concerned. And they ripen September through December. Now, I would say that's what they say. Most farms pick them in July or August. And when I've grown reed, I've never had one get past June. I eat them before that. So I've eaten reed as early as January. They're not very good. Around April, they become really good. And I can't see them improving much more after May or June. And in the book, the people at Irvine say September, December. I've never left them on the tree that long. So
So you have one pause and one reed, you basically have fruit all year round.
yeah.
And you said July, harvest in July?
Well, I pick whenever I've grown reeds, I picked them really early because they were already good. So.
How tall is that tree after reed?
Well, again, if it's producing heavily, it won't get anywhere, but it's supposed to be a tall, narrow tree. The first reed tree I grew back in the 80s looked like a Christmas tree. It was really tall and narrow, growing straight up. The last 20 years, I haven't seen them grow that way at all. I think they're using budwood they're cloning real old budwood, so the trees are having a hard time finding straight up. So we see at our customers' houses trees that do this, and then they head straight up. And I swear the one at my last house, it did a circle, it did a spiral, and then it started going up. They're not sure which way is up for a while, but they eventually go up. So, but reed is considered a tall, narrow tree, but again, just cut the top off. So it's not too wide.
Top off to like 10 feet tall, and it does just fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Carmen Hass is not on there.
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Carmen, for some reason, is not acknowledged by University of California, probably because it's not something they developed. So anyway, Carmen is what all the growers are planting. So Brokaw Nursery, for a decade or so, was selling 250,000 Carmens every year to the orchards. So what Carmen is named after Carlos Mendez. And some books they call it the Mendez strain of Hass. So what he did in Mexico is he found at an orchard a Hass avocado tree that would bloom at least 3 times a year. So it can set as many as 3 crops a year. So they started propagating those down in Mexico. Now, we've heard of other Hass trees that flower repeatedly, but no one's been able to propagate it and keep it doing that 3 times a year or twice a year bloom that they saw in their yard. So this was the first, Carmen was the first tree, Hass tree that they can propagate that would continue to do that multiple blooming cycles per year. So in Mexico, they're getting about 27 tons of avocados per acre. In California, on the Hass trees, they're getting about 7. So Brokaw brought up the Carmen tree back in 1997, patented, and said, okay, this is going to be a big hit. So that's all the orchards are wanting to get. University of California is promoting GEM because they worked 40 years to develop that tree. So GEM is their perfection of the Hass. It's their perfect Hass, 1 bloom a year, 1 crop a year, dwarf tree, big fruit, good production, but the orchards want to plant Carmen instead. So they don't, it's not on their list. it's kind of weird.
Carmen's an A variety.
Don't matter. There's nothing that blooms when it blooms. So
Between the A and the B.
it's an A,
It's an A.
but you know, you don't need, I mean, there's nothing that blooms when Carmen blooms. So it's like when it blooms in the summer, when it blooms in the fall, there's nothing else blooming. So you don't have a pollinator anyway. But if, you know, even if you up to production California from 7 tons per acre to 15 tons, you're doing an incredible job economically. But in Mexico, they're getting 27 tons per acre. So it's oh yes, with that production, you're gonna have a small tree. So in California, they're considering, they say Carmen's a compact tree. We're talking lower than 15 foot without any pruning. We planted one of these at the Great Park over 10 years ago. It's hanging in right around 10, 12 foot.
Quality of the fruit similar to Hass?
To Hass. What's interesting though is that the shape of the fruit varies on the time of the bloom. So what's turning out to be like Pinkerton avocados have real long fruit with a long neck because they bloom in December. Fuertes have a little bit shorter neck. They bloom around January. Hass is almost, you know, more pear-like or almost more toward round because it blooms in spring. Reed blooms May, June, so it's round. And the Carmen, if it blooms in summer, they make round fruit. If it blooms in winter, it makes long fruit. It's real interesting. So it's apparently the temperature which causes the fruit shapes.
Is the Carmen the same size as the regular Hass?
Yeah, but if they're making too much fruit, they'll be on the small side. So, you know, the Hass is rated between 6 and 14 ounces. So the more fruit's on the tree, the smaller the fruit are. The less fruit, the bigger they are. So I would say Carmen is going to range maybe a little more on the small side because it fruits so much. They do say that if Carmen makes too much fruit on one bloom, it may not bloom again the rest of that year until the fruit's off. But at our house, I've got a Carmen, and one year it bloomed every season. It bloomed, you know, winter made a crop, spring it made a crop, summer made a crop, fall. I couldn't believe it. Every time it was putting out new leaves, it was making flowers. And it would do that over and over and over every season and make more fruit. So a lot of the growers say, yeah, they can go walk into the orchard anytime they want, harvest. Yes.
So in the case if you wanted bigger fruit, would you prune some of the smaller pieces? Or?
I wouldn't. I just let it do its thing. I mean, you know, most of the fruit drops off anyway, so you hate to thin them. It's just better to have more fruit. So.
Is there anything you can do to encourage it to bloom more often? I mean, you said you got it 4 times one year, but not every year. So.
Yeah, so if they're making fruit, they don't grow, so they don't make any flowers. So the same branch usually doesn't flower that's got fruit on it. So a friend of mine who's in the canyon showed me a picture of his tree. He had fruit on this branch, and the branch above it was flowering and setting little fruit. He says he couldn't believe what this tree was doing. It had pretty good sized fruit on one branch, and the branch right above it was flowering and fruiting. So
it could depend on the weather somewhat too.
yeah, or spray a lot with sugar. Keep it going. So that's Carmen. So that's year round. I mean, on here they have the top 5 avocados. They list Fuerte. Now, Fuerte was the first commercial avocado tree in California. It withstood a real bad cold spell back in 1900 that killed off most of their avocados. Fuerte was survivor. Fuerte means strong. So that was the first crop in California on the avocados. The problem with Fuerte, and they've never figured out why this happens, but they said in a typical Fuerte orchard, 20% of the trees make 80% of the crop. The other trees don't do anything, ever. And they can't figure out why that happens. So we've had customers tell us, yeah, I've got a Fuerte tree, my yard produces a great amount of fruit. And other people say, my Fuerte trees never made any fruit. And my dad had 2 of them. One tree produced really well, the other tree never produced a single thing. And they can't figure out why that happens. So Fuerte is no longer promoted commercially. It is, though, considered by many people the best tasting avocado ever. So people still ask for it because they had a good tree. That's just their opinion, yeah. I've had the guy from, Tom Spellman told me that was his favorite. Yeah.
Which is your favorite?
I don't know. I've eaten all the top 5. The people at the field station who developed them gave them to me. I can't tell them apart. I don't eat them all at the same time. They give me one, and they give me another one, and a few months later I'll get another one. And you eat them, they're really good, but they're not clearly superior. Maybe they're thinking that this one is not only good tasting, but it produces a little better than the other one. I don't know. Because they rate Jan Boyce #1, and I ate it, and I go, it's okay. It's good. I've eaten the top 5. I mean, I was real impressed with Holiday. In those days, back in the 80s, it was called XX3. And so we carry Holiday, because to me, that one, is really big fruit, and they're just like big sticks of butter, I thought. Whereas the other fruits are on the smaller side.
But how many fruit do they have?
Don't know. I've never grown a Holiday. I was given the fruit. I've got a tree in my backyard now, but Holiday seems to be a little slow. Well, I don't know. It seems to be a little slower growing than the rest of the trees, although this year the Holidays came in bigger than my other trees, so I don't know. We'll have to see how it does. Yes.
Our Holiday takes like 18 months for the fruit to ripen, so we almost always have small fruit and large fruit on the tree at the same time.
Yeah, 2 crops going, yeah. Yeah, so Holiday is supposed to ripen between Labor Day and Christmas. And so it's on there for that's the longest ripening. It takes forever. So, but yeah, it is good fruit. Now they do mention Kona Sharwell, the proper name is Sharwell. It's from Australia, not Hawaii. It came from Australia to Hawaii to California, so they picked up the name Kona along the way, but it should be Sharwell. That one, they said the fruit will hold ripe for up to 12 months. So it does it a different way. It just holds onto its fruit. I don't have any of those this year. We had some last year, though. We'll try to get some, see if we can get them. They don't have Holiday in their top 5, but I'd put it there. I would tell you that's really, really good fruit. Holiday. Okay, so Holiday. And that's, say, September through December also. We're not positive. Holiday seems to be a descendant of Reed. It's got the real thick green skin on it. fairly round, not as round as Reed. Holiday is more like maybe that shape. Forte being this shape. We also have in stock, this is Jim, and that's Bacon. Jim Bacon developed both of them. I guess he likes his name. Bacon was developed first. Now, when winters are cold, this is not very good fruit. They consider it fair on here. When the winter is warm, the last 5 years winters have been warm, it's been really good fruit. Ripens in the books here says Bacon ripens January through March. The old book said November through March, and that was bad. It gave it a bad name because in November it's horrid. It tastes like water. But by the end of January, it's really good. And they sell this one at farmers markets too because they use it as a pollinator for the house. So, and it's a decent pollinator. That's why I put it in my yard, but we enjoyed the fruit. To us, you can imagine it does taste a little like bacon. But I'm sure that he didn't name it for that. And then Jim is supposed to be an improvement over bacon, so they give it a little better rating, a good instead of a fair. I have not eaten Jim yet. They're both ripen winter. We also have one called Mexicola Grande.
All these trees they plant at the same distance apart from each other, or does some of them have to take more root?
They can all produce pretty heavily at a small size. So I would say if you give them 6 foot of width, you'll get a decent crop.
So every 6 feet on center, you can plant them.
Yeah. I mean, they want to get a lot bigger than that, but if you keep spraying with honey, they'll probably stay right about that size. So Mexicola is a true Mexican avocado, even more so than Jim and Bacon. It stands the cold the best. So Mexicolas are often grown in Jim and Bacon are grown in the Central Valley too. But Mexicola is supposed to be the best tolerating cold, and the fruit on it, real thin skin. A lot of people eat the skin on Mexicola because it's so thin. It's just a real thin purple, waxy purple skin. And it's got a really strong nutty flavor. I enjoyed my Mexicola when I grew it. The Mexicola Grande is supposed to be the bigger fruit of it because the original Mexicola that they sold had fruit about that big. Mexicola Grande is supposed to be more of a normal sized fruit on that one. So that, I liked it. I thought it was a different flavor, and it ripens. This one is the one that ripens in less than a year. So it's on your tree for 6 or 8 months before it's picked. Picked in November, December. Now the regular Mexicola is a small tree. I don't know if Mexicola Grande stays small, but I grew Mexicolas in the 1980s, and a friend of mine had Mexicolas too, and trees never broke 10 feet. We do have a tree called Edinger. I think I've got one left. We carry that one because Edinger is the Israeli version of Forte. So they took Forte to Israel back around 1900, and they didn't think it was a very good producer, but one of its seedlings did better, so they called it Edinger. So Edinger here at the nursery has produced good crops, even in small pots. They say the quality is not quite as good as Forte, but it's still quite good. So Edinger is another choice. But I think I only have one left from last year. University of California over at the Irvine Field Stations where they evaluate a lot of the avocados. So this was done by the people who work there. On the back it says by Julie Frink and her assistant. So.
What's the biggest pot you put tree?
I've got a $500 pot out here.
What would be a good sized pot?
Well, I would go at least half barrel size for an avocado.
25 gallons?
Yeah. 25-gallon bucket, somewhere around there. You should have it should be able to live at least 15 years in a pot that size. that's the other thing. When plants run out of root space, they slowly die. So you know, the bigger the pot, the longer they live. But still, it cuts their lifespan down severely. But it's convenient.
So in the ground, these have a pretty long lifespan, don't they, avocados?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure there's trees around here that are approaching 100 years old. Okay. I think that's all the avocados we're carrying. I don't think there's anything else here of note.
The ones in the stores, are they carving in half now, or?
Okay, so the ones in the stores, so the University of California developed a lot of Hass offspring. So the names that are out there, Gwen is one, Gem another Hass, Carmen is again sold in the stores. Huitzel is another offspring of Hass, and the Lamb Hass. We're getting some Lamb Hass in. Lamb Hass is bigger fruit than Hass, a little better producer, slightly lower quality than Hass, but still good. They say if you go to a supermarket, if someone picks a Lamb Hass too early, and you'll get an avocado at the store that has strings in it. If you leave it on the tree long enough, the strings disappear. But Lamb Hass is sold as Hass too, and so is Surprise. So all the avocados in the market could be any one of these: Gwen, Gem, Hass, Huitzel, Carmen, Lamb Hass, and Surprise. They're all sold as Hass. That's why they don't put names on them where this says avocado.
Wasn't there a deal where you sold the Carmen and then you couldn't sell them, and now you can again?
Yeah, they found out that their agreement with Carlos Mendez was they couldn't sell it to homeowners. And now the patent's worn off. The patent was filed in 1997, so it was off this last year. So they're saying, okay, we can sell it now. So. I heard Louis Nursery in Riverside does too. In fact, they had some last summer. I don't know how they got theirs before we got ours. Now, just so you know, you can buy directly from Brokaw, but you have to buy at least 20 trees. So we were able to, we've carried Carmen almost every year. And what happens is if you call up Brokaw and said, my little orchard in my backyard, we need 20 Carmens, they'll sell them to you. And then you can sell me the ones you don't need. But now we're past that point where you have to do that. But you can get them on Deucer rootstock. So if you wanted to do that, if you did that, I'd buy them from you. But usually it has to be a contract for a year. If you tell them I want 20 Carmens, they'll line you up for next year, and you have to pay for them in advance. So that's the disadvantage. But I've had several customers do that for us. They bought 20 Carmens, or they bought more than 20 and sold us what they didn't need. And we bought them from a nursery once in San Diego that went out of business a year after we bought them. We don't know if they were shut down for doing that.
So you think that Deucer rootstock would be worth going to extra effort?
I didn't like the way they looked. I thought the trees always looked stressed. In my backyard, the Deuce rootstock trees did not perform that well. But I had my last house, the soil was horrible. It was solid clay. So I don't think Deuce likes that solid clay as much as Toro Canyon did real well on that. And the Toro Canyon trees always look better. But Deuce, the trees on Deuce first year making 10 fruit on trees this big. So it's very, makes the trees really precocious. Whereas Toro Canyon, they grow. So it has its things. Now, we've heard that the industry is changing direction. All the rootstocks up until a few years ago were for root rot. But the drought of the last 5 years, they found a lot of problems with a lot of those rootstocks. They wouldn't handle drought. So they're brought in a lot of rootstocks from Israel that are more for drought. So they don't do this tip burning so badly when it's dry. So, now, of course, now that they've done that, it's gonna rain and rain and rain for 5 years. You know, that goes that way. Okay, thank you very much.
Gary, I missed the thing about the honey. Could you repeat what you said about?
Sure. Let me just turn this off.